Okay, good evening and welcome to the first regular public meeting of the Halton District School Board. It is Wednesday, September the 1st, 2020. As per all our board meetings, this meeting is recorded and will be posted on the hdsb.ca website. Please note that tonight we are on our maiden voyage of our new hybrid meeting model, where some of us are in the boardroom and others are attending remotely. As per our bylaws and policies, trustees attending remotely have all the rights and privileges of a board member present in the boardroom. I will now like to take trustee roll call. Please answer as I call your name in alphabetical order by last name. Trustee Amos.
Good evening, everyone.
Trustee designate Bow.
Good evening.
Trustee Collard.
Good evening.
Trustee Daniele.
Thank you, I am here.
Vice Chair Al Harrison.
Hello.
Trustee Garretts.
Hello, everyone.
Trustee Gray.
Coming to you live from the board office.
Trustee Oliver.
Good evening, everyone.
Trustee Reynolds.
Hi, everybody.
Trustee Rocha.
Good evening, everyone.
Trustee Shuttleworth.
And as though I don't have the velveteen voice of Trustee Gray, I too am at the board office.
Trustee designate for the moment, Vigilankara.
I'm here.
So tonight is our first board meeting with our new director of education, Curtis Ennis. He's sitting right beside me. He joined the Halton District School Board on August the 1st. Director Ennis comes to us from the Toronto District School Board and has an educational and practical background in business and finance, as well as a long and impactful career in education. I'm sure many of you saw the incredibly positive and overwhelming reaction on social media when his appointment to our board was announced. On behalf of the trustees, I would like to formally welcome you to the table. And on that note, Director Ennis, could you please note the staff that are in attendance this evening?
Thank you. And through the chair, this evening in the boardroom, we have Associate Director David Bogue, and we also have all our staff members joining us remotely. So though it's in the boardroom, just myself and Associate Director Bogue.
Thank you very much. And today, trustee designate for the moment, Vigilankara will be honoring the land.
Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, water, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us.
Okay, thank you very much. And Kevin, I was just wondering if the feed is this what the feed does? A technical question for our maiden voyage. When we're talking in here, because I just see a picture of Trustee Rocha's face on the screen. So I just wanted to make sure that that was okay for. No. Okay. Okay. So moving on, are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? And I'm going to look to the speakers list here. Seeing none. Next, we are up to the agenda. Trustee Daniele, would you like to move a motion to approve the agenda this evening?
Thank you, I so move.
Thank you. Trustee Gray, would you like to second this motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Is there any discussion on the agenda this evening? I'll look to the speakers list. Seeing none. So all those in favor, and So using our blue form, and that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. So we do not have Inspire Award presentations this evening, so we're going to move to a very important part of the evening, which is the oath for student trustees for 2021-2022. And I will now pass the mic over to Director Ennis to perform the ceremony.
Thank you, Chair Gerbens. It is indeed my honor and privilege this evening to present to you our two new student trustees for the school year 2021-2022. Both student trustees are excited and ready to go. The first is we have Vandy Vidyalankara, who is from White Oaks Secondary School, and we have Casey Bao, who will be joining us for her first term from Milton District High School. And so both Vandy and Casey will be working collaboratively to support students right across the Halton District School Board. And we have a oath of office that they will be taking at this time. I'm going to ask Trustee Vidyalankara if you would please read your oath.
I, Vandy Vidyalankara, do solemnly declare that, in accordance with the Education Act, related legislation, and board policies and procedures, I will truly, faithfully, impartially, and to the best of my ability execute the office of student trustee. In my role as student trustee, I will comply with freedom of information and protection of personal privacy and conflict of interest legislation, recognizing the importance of maintaining the confidentiality of the board with regard to matters that are dealt with in closed session, and declare not to divulge any information of the contents of any material shared with the trustees in closed meetings, and that I am not disqualified under any requirement from being a student trustee member of the Halton District School Board.
Thank you, Trustee Vidyalankara. At this time, I'm going to ask Trustee Bao, Student Trustee Bao, to read her oath.
I, Casey Bao, do solemnly declare that, one, in accordance with the Education Act, related legislation, and the board policies and procedures, I will truthfully, faithfully, and impartially, and to the best of my ability, execute the office of student trustee. In my role as student trustee, I will comply with the freedom of information and protection of personal privacy and conflict of interest legislation, recognizing the importance of maintaining the confidentiality of the board with regard to matters that are dealt with in closed session, and declare not to divulge in any information of the contents of any material shared with the trustees in closed meetings, and that I am not disqualified under any requirements from being a student trustee member of the Halton District School Board.
Thank you, Trustee Bao. Please join me, Casey, and they're taking pictures of you from inside the boardroom. So they're asking you to smile as Trustee Shuttleworth tries to take a picture of all of us from different angles. Okay. All right, we're having a moment here, folks.
Sorry. Don't get too close. We're going to get reported to Doug Ford.
Okay, thank you. Please join me, trustees, in congratulating both Trustees Vidyalankara and Trustee Bao.
Okay, that's always a wonderful moment. Okay, so we are up we have no delegations this evening, so we're up to our consent agenda items. Trustee Rocha, would you like to make a motion to deal with the consent agenda this evening?
Yes, I would.
Excellent, thank you. Trustee Oliver, would you like to second? Trustee Oliver?
Yes, I will second that. Thank you.
Excellent. So I will put the motion on the table. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the consent agenda action items and receive the information items for September 1st, 2021. Looking at the speakers list, are there any items that need to be pulled for discussion? Trustee Rocha?
Yes, through you, Chair. I'd like to pull I'd like to pull the order paper and discuss one of the motions in question.
Okay, there are no other speakers, so why don't you ask your questions now?
Okay, perfect. So in reference to a motion that was made, it's M21-0121, and it reads, be it resolved that the bylaw regarding the scheduling of board meetings be reviewed by the Governance Standing Committee and a report with recommendations come back to the board on September 8, 2021. So that's the motion. Not sure what the process is, but I'd like to either rephrase it or null that motion and rewrite a new one. So instead of presenting the revised wording for the bylaws at the initial September 8th meeting that has now since been rescheduled, I'd like to present it at the Committee of the Whole meeting on September 29th.
Okay, so you'd like to rescind? You want to basically rescind that motion and replace it with a different motion?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
Point of order, I don't think we need to rescind. We just need to change the date and say that it's coming to Committee of the Whole. In essence, the motion itself is still the same. It's just that it's landing on a different day at a different meeting.
Okay, amend something previously adopted?
Yeah.
Okay, so I take it that Trustee Rocha will make that motion, and Trustee Collard, you'll second it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there any further discussion on this, looking to the speakers list? Seeing no speakers. So all those in favor of amending something previously adopted to change the date from September the 8th to the 29th of September and board meeting to Committee of the Whole meeting. All those in favor? I am missing. Okay, so but you're in favor, Trustee Gray? Okay, so that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, and on to everything else is good. So actually, we kind of did a bit of a no-no, but I think we're fine. That there's nothing else that anybody needs to discuss in the consent agenda. So be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the consent agenda action items and receive the information items for September 1st, 2021. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. So now we are up to the ratification action items. Vice Chair Harrison, do we have any business from private session that requires approval?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We don't. No.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have no action items for this evening. And so we are up to communications to the board. Trustee Vigilankara and Trustee Bao, do you have a student trustee report for us? Excellent. You are on the ball. Go right ahead.
Yeah, it was a busy summer for us. Okay. Hello. Oh, actually, I think. Oh yeah. So good evening, everyone. It's Lovely to see you all again, some of you in person and some of you virtually. Trustee Bao and I are very excited for the upcoming school year and for the Student Senate term. I'll pass it to Trustee Bao. I'm realizing this, we're switching back and forth. We're not going to do that again.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to formally introduce myself. My name is Casey Bao, and I will be this year's student trustee alongside Trustee Whittle Kara. I'm so honored to be here today in the boardroom with you all virtually.
So since our last student trustee report in June, there have been a number of initiatives by the Student Senate which took place over the course of the summer vacation. So the following are some updates from myself and the Student Senate. So firstly, our mental health poster contest took place in the month of July. We had over 100 students interested in the contest. Our judges had a very difficult time deciding on the winning posters. The three winning posters demonstrated a high level of creativity, showcased the importance of taking care of our mental well-being, and shared useful resources that students can use. Uzair Gondal from Abbey Park High School came in third place. Ella Moffitt from Georgetown District High School came in second place. And Anandita Gadil, a grade 8 student, came in first place. So we plan on distributing the winning posters to schools across the system so that they can be displayed for students to view. All the posters will be posted on our Student Senate website as well, studentsenate.hdsb.ca. Secondly, I supported Michelle Bates and her team on a number of mental health related videos. I led the creation of a student video, which will be shared with staff this upcoming September 2nd PD Day. The video has students from grade 7 to 12 sharing their thoughts on mental well-being supports in schools, how teachers can help them, and how the impacts of COVID-19 have affected their mental health and well-being. The second video project I led is a student-to-student mental health series, and these videos were created by students for students, and these videos will actually be on the HDSB social media for students to view. Both projects were supported by the communications department, namely Summer Sweetman and Kevin Raposo. We were also very fortunate to have the support and guidance of Student Senate Advisor and Vice Principal at Elsie McGill, Miss Louisa Vitello. And lastly, I worked on another series of mental health and well-being videos focused on sharing tools and useful information for students. I led this work alongside the summer social worker team, as well as lead social worker Becky Mantonen. Together, we wrote and filmed a welcome video for students with a specific focus on supporting students as they return to school. So we share resources and basically just encourage students and let them know that we understand how they're feeling, we hear them, and that we're here for them as they come back to school, because that can be challenging as is, but especially challenging now. And yeah, we plan on developing more and more videos for the series in the coming months. Students will once again be at the focus, and I hope to get our new student senators involved as well.
So last week, Trustee Whittle Kara and I filmed a video introducing ourselves as the 2021 to 2022 student trustees. And the purpose of this video was to explain what the roles of a student trustee is and the student senate are, and how they can get involved and contact us. This video will be shared with the students across the system. Trustee Whittle Kara and I also participated in our first orientation this year with Director Ennis, Trustee Oliver, Trustee Reynolds, and Associate Director Bogues to familiarize ourselves with the boardroom. We will be participating in our second orientation next week with the Senate staff advisors and some of our goals for the upcoming year. So as we enter this year, the goals of the student trustees are to focus on raising awareness and improving accessibility and engagement with the student senate, supporting student well-being, and advocating for more inclusive and equitable policies and practices in schools. We believe that these goals align with the HDSB's multi-year plan and fit with the current climate. We will look forward to the year ahead, and thank you so much. We are so happy and there to answer any questions or comments you guys may have.
Well, before anybody jumps on the list, I want to say, wow. You've already done, a year's worth of work, and you were just did your oath tonight. So excellent job. I see that Trustee Shuttleworth has come on the list along with Trustee Gray. So go right ahead, Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to both Trustee Bao and Trustee Vigilankara. I just have a question as to what your plans are for Student Senate this year, how you're going to run the meetings.
I turned over to Associate Director Bogue because, I mean, I know my plans for Student Senate, but I don't know what might be approved. I think we're hoping to have a hybrid model. So if we can use this space, we definitely like to use it. But obviously we have to be reasonable. I know a lot of our senators last year actually appreciated having the virtual element. So I think no matter what, we'll definitely have a virtual aspect to Senate. I hope for the future as well, because it really does help with access to Student Senate. Yeah, so in terms of what it actually looks like, not sure yet, but hopefully hybrid.
Thank you.
And Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much, through the chair. Thank you very much for suggesting that the hybrid model may be in place, because I know for many of the students in the North, this was very, very helpful for them and to be involved. I just wanted to go back to your mental health poster report. I didn't catch the first place school, the person, what school they were from.
We don't actually have the record of the school that they're attending,
okay.
Because I believe they're leaving the board, but I have to verify that. So I do know that they're a grade 8 student. And so in a sea full of secondary, they were the grade 8 student that won.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Associate Director Bogue.
Thanks, Chair Gerbrands. I just wanted to welcome the student trustees, and I had a question. Perhaps it's for Student Trustee Bao. You mentioned a video that you and Trustee Vigilankara had produced for. I think it was the intended audience was for students, but I wonder if that would be appropriate to share with administrators in schools. And sometimes in the past as well, we've invited our student trustees to come to a family schools meeting to speak to admin just about the role of our student trustees and how they can support your work and support student leadership within their schools as well. So that's something that we could discuss certainly moving forward as well, if that makes sense. And I'd be happy to share the video if you feel that would be appropriate.
Thank you, Associate Director Bogue. I think that is an amazing idea. I think sharing that with our staff is a great way to also further connect with students and further the relationship between the student trustees and the students. So yeah, I love that suggestion.
Excellent. I'm sensing there is going to be wonderfully strong student voice this year. Okay, so we will now move on in our agenda. We don't have any action items right now for September 22nd. I'm sure there will be some. We don't have any information items for this evening. Are there any notices of motion? Looking to the speakers list. Okay, seeing no speakers, though there may be stuff that comes up later. Director's report. Director Ennis, go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair Gerbrands, and good evening, everyone. I am excited to be here with you on this, my first public board meeting. First, I'd like to thank the Board of Trustees for their confidence in me to lead the way forward in the Halton District School Board. It's been an unbelievably warm welcome to the board, and I've been introduced to an extremely competent, highly motivated, and deeply supportive senior team, beginning with my Associate Director, David Bogue, on through to every member of the senior team who have been highly responsive to the students and families we serve. I want the board and the public to know that our senior team staff came to work during their vacation as direction started to roll in from the ministry through their operational guidance and planning for the 2021-22 school year. For their commitment, selfless act of service, and dedication to students and families of Burlington, Halton Hills, Oakville, and Milton, I'm extremely grateful and I thank you. Because of this commitment, and that of our teachers, administrators, and all other school-based staff, all office staff, executive assistants, facilities and caretaking, and our business services team, the Halton District School Board is ready to receive students next week. Thanks to the Board of Trustees for their ongoing advocacy on behalf of our students and our families. We are indeed indebted to Dr. Megani and her team at the Halton Region Public Health, who have been instrumental in partnering with us as we formulated our plan for September 2021. I'd like to take a few minutes to highlight a few areas of our September 2021 plan. We're focused on active screening requirements. Last week, we were informed by the Ministry of Education that students would be required to provide screening verification for the first 2 weeks of school. As well, schools will be sending communication homes to families so that they are aware of this procedure. We ask our families to plan for this in their first day preparations and to build this into their morning routines. Model switch. Just a reminder to families and to students looking to switch learning models that you will receive communication from the board on September the 9th. Families will also receive or have until September the 16th to submit this form. The change will be effective October the 12th. There will be a process for secondary students for semester 2 that we will share later on in November. Co-curriculars. We have been given direction that co-curriculars can start following the parameters that were set out by the ministry. Our football practices in some of our high schools have started this week. We are moving slowly and cautiously and seeking to keep our students engaged at the same time. We will be monitoring this closely, and if there's any change in direction in the circumstances of Halton, we will change as well. Our health and physical education. In our elementary and secondary health and physical education courses, students will have access to the breadth of facilities and equipment available. We also have outdoor spaces for supporting programs. High and low contact activities are permitted indoors and outdoors as follows. Masking is not required when playing high or low contact activities outdoors. Masking is encouraged for indoor sports where they can be worn safely based on the activity. Masking is encouraged but not required indoors for low contact physical activities if a minimum distance of 2 meters can be maintained between cohorts and as much distancing as possible maintained within a cohort. Music. Music programs will follow the guidance from Public Health and the Ministry of Education. This guidance includes parameters for singing and the use of instruments. Singing is permitted indoors. Masking is encouraged but not required for singing indoors if a minimum distance of 2 meters can be maintained between cohorts and as much distance as possible within a cohort. The use of instrument is permitted indoors within a cohort if a minimum distance of 2 meters or more can be maintained. And for wind and brass instruments, students will be provided with an individual mouthpiece and have proper sanitation of the instruments. Transportation. The beginning of the school year is usually marked by transportation delays, resulting from traffic, new student riding the bus, and bus drivers learning all their routes. While we are happy to report that we do not anticipate a driver shortage this September, we do have one situation that we are monitoring, which would lead to potential delays for schools as listed below. First, Student Canada is experiencing significant road construction outside their yard on Dundas Street in Burlington. As a result, traffic is very congested and may cause potential delays to their buses departing and entering the yard. We are working closely with the bus company and the region of Halton on solutions to mitigate delays. However, confirmation of this is still pending. The context of this pandemic is one that none of us wanted. However, I am confident that the staff of the Halton District School Board will adapt to our new reality. We will stay true to the 5 commitments in the multi-year strategic plan, namely equity and inclusion, mental health and well-being, learning and achievement, environmental leadership, Indigenous perspectives, and awareness. And we are resolute in our stance to the Human Rights, Equity Action, and Accountability Plan, the way forward. which reflects our commitment to create a safe, inclusive learning environment free from discrimination for students, families, staff, and members of the public. Today, as I drove by a school, I saw cars in the parking lot. I instinctively knew what was happening inside. School staff were busy preparing to receive excited students, some of whom have never been to school in person, even though this is not their first year in our board. Some who haven't seen their teachers and friends in over a year, and many who are craving human contact once again. We are prepared to receive them. Associate Director Bogue and myself would like to thank you, and we look forward to a great year in the Halton District School Board. It won't be without challenges, but we are prepared to respond to whatever comes our way. We are going to have a wonderful year this year. Thank you.
Okay, so for the next item on your director's report, the vaccination disclosure update.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'd like to turn this item over to our Superintendent of Human Resources, Sari Taha.
Good evening. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you, Director Ennis. Good evening, trustees. Through you, Chair Gerbrands, to the rest of our Board of Trustees. In the next few minutes, I would like to spend some time to provide an overview of the vaccination disclosure policy that had been released by the government and share with you our implementation strategy and status to date with respect to this requirement. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at the end of my commentary. So as you're all aware, on August 17th, 2021, this year, the government announced its intentions to introduce a mandatory vaccination disclosure procedure or policy for the education sector. This includes all school board employees, as well as volunteers, third-party providers to students, and contractors. We have received initial guidance from the ministry with respect to the requirements and expectations in terms of implementing this disclosure procedure. So I would like to provide a quick summary of what that entails. By September 7th of this year, individuals subject to this procedure are expected to submit a formal attestation affirming one of the following. One, if they are fully vaccinated. Two, if they are not vaccinated due to a medical exemption. And the third selection that they may affirm is that they are not vaccinated. Individuals who are fully vaccinated are required to upload confirmation that they are fully vaccinated. Individuals who are not vaccinated due to a medical exemption are required to provide medical documentation to support this exemption. This documentation must be completed by a physician or a registered nurse. And in addition to that, they are required to participate in rapid testing requirements in accordance to Ministry of Ed guidelines. So this is the cohort of individuals who are unvaccinated, and the reason for that are medical reasons. Individuals who are not vaccinated for other reasons other than medical exemption, and that could be a range of reasons, are required to also participate in rapid testing requirements in accordance to the Ministry of Ed guidelines, as well as participate in an educational program that underscores the benefits and safety of receiving the vaccine. So that's the first key requirement, and that is all to be collected by September 7th. The other two key deliverables, by September 10th, school boards are expected to share aggregated attestation and statistical information with the ministry in terms of the percentages of those who have been vaccinated or unvaccinated. So again, by September 10th, we are to share those results, the statistical information, through an attestation to the ministry. Also by September 15th, which is a third deliverable, school boards are expected to publicly post these statistical information that we have shared with the ministry, and continue doing so on a monthly basis. In terms of what these numbers look like, we are required to provide 4 key elements. One is the number of individuals that have provided proof of being fully vaccinated against COVID-19. The other statistic is the number of individuals that provided a documented medical reason for not being fully vaccinated. The third statistic is the number of individuals that have completed an educational session about the benefits of COVID-19 vaccination, which is an alternative to being fully vaccinated or being exempt from a vaccination. And the last statistic is really the total number of individuals to which this policy will apply. So those are the key deliverables that we are tasked in achieving in accordance to this initial guidance that we received from the ministry. In terms of the status to date, how are we doing in terms of being ready to deliver on those deliverables? We are still waiting further information from the government, lots of information that we are still waiting on in relation to rapid testing requirements and the educational program. Those details have not been made available to us. What I can say, however, is that we are currently working with our human resources information system provider to develop a solution for the secure and confidential collection of this information. And this system will be available to employees by accessing the Employee Self-Service Portal, ESS, through our internal website. I'm happy to report to you that our testing is complete. It was complete as of 2 hours ago, and we are ready to turn the switch on for September 7th, pending ministry information and further guidelines. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the HR staff that have been working diligently on this, and our IT department who have been working also with us without an exaggeration, weekends and nights to make this happen, as well as our HRIS vendor that we have partnered with. So again, in short, we are ready to go for September 7th. And if you ask me, why haven't you turned the switch on? Again, we don't have any formal documentation to say that we are rolling this program on the basis of this document. We have yet to receive it. We don't expect that the formal documents will look much different than we have seen today. However, the requirement with respect to provide an exemption may change. While currently it's only on a medical basis, it's highly possible that that exemption process can go beyond medical grounds. So that's one primary reason why we haven't rolled out this application yet today, even though we're ready to roll it out. Of note, worth noting in terms of rapid testing, it's our understanding that the rapid testing kits will be provided to school boards by the ministry for the purpose of participating in rapid testing requirements. So in terms of availability and access and cost, and I use this in a very loose sense, cost to employees, there will not be a cost to the employee in terms of accessing these rapid tests for the purpose of participating in this disclosure procedure. I think this is all I have to share with you to date, based on the information that we have. Again, we'll provide further information and guidance to our staff as soon as they become available in terms of steps to complete the attestation and any other particulars in terms of the mechanics of the rapid testing and the educational program. And again, all of this will have to be captured in an administrative procedure that really sets out the responsibilities, the duties of employees and the board, as well as the legislation that we have to ground all of our practices in, including human rights, as well as the Personal Health Information Protection Act, as well as MFIPA. I'm happy to take any questions, but this is to date, minute by minute lay of the land in terms of where we're at with this procedure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Taha. We have a building list here of speakers. We'll start with Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you through you, Chair. Before I ask my question, I just want to send a really big thank you to Sari. I know how hard he has been working, and I really appreciate all the time he's taken to help fill in the gaps in some of the questions I've already had. My original question was for Director Ennis, but I have another question for Superintendent Taha. That might take precedence. So I'm going to go to that one first, and I'll come back later to talk to you. So Superintendent Taha, I'm a little perplexed or concerned about the cost of the rapid testing. So you're saying it's coming to us from the ministry and that they are free, but nothing is free. So that cost is coming from somewhere. So what I am wondering is this an unlimited free supply of rapid testings, or will there be a point in time that somebody is going to have to take responsibility for the tests?
Through you, Chair Gerbens, to Trustee Shuttleworth, thank you for that question. Based on the information that we have to date, school boards will be receiving, and this is, again, initial information, roughly testing kits that equal 20% of their population or staff population. And this assumes that based on the vaccination rates in the province, that one would assume that your fully vaccinated rate will be about 80%. So the ministry is assuming that we will be having roughly 20% of our staff unvaccinated. So we will be receiving 20% in terms of the number of our staff equal to kits. So that will be roughly around 2,000 kits for our school board. Each kit contains 25 tests, and this is all the information that we have. I couldn't even comment on the frequency of the testing that would occur. Our understanding is that you have to complete a test weekly. So in theory, each kit, which contains 25 rapid tests, will last you 25 weeks. So to your question, if it's unlimited, at this point, we have 25 weeks worth of supply per employee who needs to participate in that program. Certainly, there's a cost to all of this. While it may not be borne directly by the employee, there's certainly a cost to run the supply chain and to provide those rapid tests. But in terms of cost to the employee directly, at this point, there doesn't appear to be one. But that could change. And this is all the information I have on this particular question.
So
today.
Just a quick follow-up. So I'm just thinking, I'm pretty positive that the testing was twice weekly, if I remember correctly. But I'm just kind of comparing this to travel. So if a person wants to travel outside of the country, they have to pay $200 to get their test. So that is a personal burden that they are taking on. I'm just a little bit, I don't know if it's perplexed or confused, really how the cost of these tests is being borne by the taxpayer, really. So just a little bit of a harsh truth, but just sort of something that I was been thinking about. But thank you.
Okay, next speaker on the speakers list is Vice Chair Al Harrison. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. My first part was going to be a point of order, but I went on the speakers list instead, and I just wanted to let people know, hopefully the people who have posed questions in advance of the meeting, that is members of our family stakeholder community who have written in with questions, we are trying to answer them in the context of the presentations rather than at the end of the meeting. And Superintendent Taha, one of the questions was related to saying, why can't we use these rapid tests within schools? So as you've reported, there is a ministry program that will see this being implemented at the school level. So that is indeed happening. I'm not sure if that's what the questioner had intended specifically, but thank you for the answer. And then my own question is just related to the MFIPA, the privacy piece, because I can imagine that this is, well, it is a very contentious matter or divisive matter in the community. And I would just wonder if we have any instruction for, family members who may be curious about vaccine status of specific staff members in specific schools. And so can you speak to how MFIPA, the privacy legislation, relates to those kinds of requests?
So let me start by saying that my response is really limited by the fact that we have not seen, and I don't use this as an off-ramp, we have not seen an official document or a piece of legislation that sets out the requirements with respect to this disclosure procedure. What I can say, however, is two things. One, there are two sets of, there are two cohorts or two populations that are subject to this disclosure policy. One subset are employees of the board, and the other subset are either third-party providers or volunteers who regularly visit our schools. And again, I say this in a very general terms. Given that we are dealing with those two subsets of populations, there are two pieces of legislation that will apply. One is the Personal Health Information Protection Act, and that applies to the subset population who are considered employees of the board. And this assumes, and even though we're not acting in the capacity of healthcare providers, this assumes that we will be considered pseudo healthcare providers in terms of the health and wellness staff and human resources. So the PHIPAA will apply, even though we're not acting as regulated healthcare professionals, even though we're guardians and custodians of this healthcare information. So all this to say, the access to this information will be very, very limited and on a need-to-know basis, and only for the purpose of participating and administering this disclosure procedure. Your question with respect to the general public having the right to request this information, the short answer is no. So even though it's a public disclosure procedure and there's public interest to this, we are exempt from FOI requests with respect to these kinds of information, even for volunteers and non-board employees. So MFIPA still applies, but a higher level of privacy under PHIPAA applies for employees. So again, it's exempt from the Freedom of Information request, whether you're an employee or not. Again, I would like to put a disclaimer out there. I'm basing this on initial information. I don't have any piece of legislation to rely on. I hope that answered your question. I know I was long-winded, but it's a bit complicated.
Okay, next is Trustee Collard. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to Superintendent Taha. My question is about the cost of the PCR tests. I wasn't clear on what you stated. You said that the employees won't have to pay, but are these tests being provided to the board at no cost to the board, or are they part of our budget? And are we getting any kind of funding whatsoever to cover that? I'm just curious about where the money comes from this when we have in our second or third year in a row a deficit budget.
Through you, Chair Grabans, to Trustee Collard, I will certainly turn to Superintendent Nagoy for a more refined answer. My understanding is that the province, through the central procurement operation, will be providing these kits, and the funding will come through that budget line, but I'll turn to Superintendent Nagoy for a bit more detail on this.
Thank you, and through you, for the chair, to Trustee Collard. That is correct. This, from my understanding, this will work very similarly with the PPE procurement and delivery that is being done centrally. So it is covered by taxpayers' funding through the provincial budget, but it's not broken down by board or the board. at least at this point and what we are receiving, it's going to be delivered to us through the central procurement, the provincial procurement. So no cost to the board for the delivery. We will be incurring logistical costs, just like we do with the PPE delivery from the central location to our schools, and working with the HR department to get the data in terms of how many kids for which location. So that's going to be a little bit of work, and the courier service will cost some money, but it won't be the significant cost of covering for the kids.
Thank you for that. May I follow up?
Yes.
Okay, my next question isn't about money. It's back to the personal information. How are we going to administer these tests so that we are sure that the employees and volunteers who are having to use these tests in order to be in our schools are doing so in a private way? Schools are busy places, and I'm wondering how we will afford the space and time for everyone to get these tests done without anyone else knowing who's having the test.
Through you, Chair Grabans, to Trustee Collard, another great question that we continue to, with great deal of patience, wait on guidance from the ministry. You're absolutely right. The idea that we will task schools with the responsibility of distributing these kits and ensure privacy and confidentiality of very sensitive medical information is very concerning to me. The information we received today suggests that these kits, according to the memo, will be then shipped to schools. So you can just imagine if we are shipping X numbers of kits to school A, B, and C, and what comes with that. So we are aware of our obligations under the privacy legislations that engage this procedure. In our conversations with senior admin, with our federations and locals and various stakeholders, it was paramount that the idea that any personal information is disclosed or breached, or a process that we have in place that could allow others to draw inferences as to who's vaccinated, who isn't, is something that we really, really need to be cognizant of. I wish I can tell you how we think, the supply chain is going to work. If I'm pushed for an answer, I'm going to say that it's going to be very, very centrally driven with health and wellness staff only having to quarterback all of this. But again, I'm speaking out of turn because I really don't know what the guidelines say with respect to the rapid testing. My understanding is you can do this at home, but the very idea that I'm handing a rapid test to employee X is in of itself in a public space is problematic. So I don't know how this is going to unfold, and we have to figure it out. I wish I had a better answer.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Trustee Gray, go right ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. To Superintendent Taha, we recognize that you've spoken tonight about the vaccination disclosure policy at length, and I think we all understand that, but I had some questions today from the constituents in my area, and they seek the clarification of this question. Could you clarify for the public why this board has chosen not to make it mandatory for all staff to be fully vaccinated? Thank you.
I will turn to Director Ennis for, thank you, Trustee Gray, through you, Chair Grabans. I will turn to Director Ennis first, and I may chime in after that.
Thank you, and through Chair Grabans to Trustee Gray. Mandatory vaccination, as you know, the entire rollout of the mandatory vaccine policy by the government has been a bit of a misnomer, and I believe has created a lot of confusion among the public. And so we really do not have a mandatory vaccination policy in place. What we have really is mandatory disclosure. And so I believe that we really need to have that kind of clarity to the public. I know that some of the private institutions and some government institutions, both, whether provincially or municipally, have moved towards mandatory vaccination. But that is on a different level. That's not the mandate that we received from the ministry. And I'll turn to Superintendent Taha to add further information.
Thank you, Director Ennis, through you, Chair Gervais, Trustee Gray. And that's exactly true, that the procedure, while have been titled as mandatory vaccination, it's more or less a disclosure procedure with requirements regardless of whether you are fully vaccinated or not. To contemplate a mandatory vaccination policy, it would be prudent to do our homework with respect to our legal obligations and any landmines that we may step into before considering that approach, while at the same time honoring our obligations under the Human Rights Code and any relevant legislation. So again, a mandatory vaccination policy, in the sense that you are vaccinated or you don't have a job with the HDSB, is an entirely different proposition that would require a different kind of due diligence. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, thank you very much. And I really appreciate Director Ennis's comments about the confusion that has been created. I think that that's where this question is coming from. And I guess out there, as mentioned by Superintendent Taha, the notion of some businesses requiring mandatory vaccination or that their jobs disappear has also created that sort of confusion in the public. Thank you very much.
Okay, next is Trustee Daniele. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. And I'm one of those plan for the worst, hope for the best kind of people. So I try to think of what could possibly go wrong. Have you prepared, or is there any way of preparing, Superintendent Taha, through the chair, to you, for things like our kindergarten classes where there are two staff? Should one be vaccinated and one not be vaccinated? Is there an opportunity for vaccinated people to decline working with unvaccinated people in close quarters? Or is there anything along those lines, any concerns that we have? You mentioned minefields, and that's one of the ones that occurred to me. And I just wondered if that was something that had been brought to me by a constituent. So I wanted to ask, and they actually asked, can I find out if my child's teacher is vaccinated? And I'm not able to do that. So I'm just wondering, about a staff to staff piece, what we're able to put into place. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Daniele. Through you, Chair Gervais, to rest of the trustees. I would like to say that it's a great question, and it's not unexpected that someone may wish to know the vaccination status of their colleague. It's a natural human reaction, I suppose. Having said that, vaccination is one layer of protection with respect to the vaccine and the COVID pandemic. A very effective strategy, but it's not the only strategy. So the health and safety of staff and students is something that we have managed and mitigated through a variety of means, not only through the vaccination process, which is obviously effective by all accounts, but through other means, be it distancing, PPEs, cleaning products, hygiene, and so on. In terms of an employee requesting to only work with a vaccinated employee, that is not a right that they have under a collective agreement or any pertinent employee legislation. Ultimately, our obligation is to provide a safe working environment. If anyone requires an accommodation due to their own medical circumstances, we address those on a case-by-case basis. And being next to an individual who's unvaccinated does not necessarily mean that you are compromised, because there are other layers of protection that we afford our employees. So again, it's a case-by-case basis. It's not something that we are concerned about, because we do have the strategies to respond to those concerns. But yeah, we are prepared to have those kinds of questions or those kinds of inquiries or demands by employees. And I don't mean to use the word demand in a negative sense, but it's an understandable reaction from a health and safety perspective.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, thank you, I don't.
Okay. Before we have a second time speaker, I'm just going to pop in a question. You talked about the Human Resources Information System and the changes that needed to be made. Coming from an IT background myself, I know that those can get expensive. And who's paying for these changes to our system? And are we building in flexibility because we don't have all the answers?
Thank you, Chair Gerbent. Through you to the rest of the trustees. The answer to who's paying, we are. We are paying for these enhancements and customizations and changes that we have to implement to our human resources information system. As I alluded to earlier, our vendor has been a vendor that we have partnered with for the past several years. They have been extremely responsive, throughout our relationship with them as it relates to the changes, the twists and turns in the education sector. We are building in, based on the information we have, we think we know how, the scalability or the functionality that this system ought to deliver. So not only the collection of the attestation information and the uploading, the secure uploading of proof of vaccination, we have to put infrastructure in place that really monitors the rapid testing based on guidelines that we haven't seen, and remind employees that their rapid testing participation is due and that they need to submit these results in a secure manner, hopefully through leveraging technology. So that's our thinking. And so we are budgeting for a system that will do all of this. And the cost is not insignificant. And again, the answer is we are bearing the cost as a board unless funding comes from the province. Perhaps Superintendent Nagoy can comment on that. There are 13 boards in this sector in the English and Catholic sector that use this provider. So we understand that the cost will be shared among the boards. Nonetheless, it's not an insignificant cost. And these costs could be ongoing as this process expands in terms of its requirements.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that there is some partnering among boards to try to mitigate costs as much as possible. Very prudent of us to do that. Thank you. And so I will go to the second time speaker, Trustee Shuttleworth. Go right ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm switching gears a little bit. I'm actually going to ask this to Director Ennis. I almost called you Director Curtis. Okay, so I'm just coming back to what you were talking about, extracurricular activities and going under the advice of public health. I'm just wondering, things such as football games, are we looking at having spectators allowed to go? I know there are a lot of parents that are wondering about the return to sport and if they're going to be able to see their kids play. I don't know. I haven't seen that. So I was just wondering if you know the answer to that question.
Thank you. Through Chair Gerbent to Trustee Shuttleworth, the conversation that we've had is about providing our students with the opportunities to engage in co-curriculars as much as possible under the guidelines that were provided by the ministry and in consultation with public health. The question around spectators or those who may be watching is one that we are still grappling with, because we want to be sure that we are not exposing our students and our staff unnecessarily to any kind of exposure to the virus. And so we are still not sure exactly how we're going to proceed. Maybe we'll do something differently for those sports that are outdoors versus indoors, but we have not finalized what that might look like for families and those who might want to see their child playing. But our first attempt was to look at getting the kids engaged in the activity and then moving outward from there to who may be able to see it.
Thank you.
Okay. There's no other speakers, so I actually have a second question myself. The vaccination disclosure update, this has nothing to do with students, though. We have no disclosure at all about students' vaccination status from 2009 and older, right? Just clarification?
Correct. The policy only applies to employees, permanent and casual employees, as well as third-party providers to students or those who engage staff in their services, as well as volunteers or visitors who regularly and frequently engage with students and or staff on board premise. So it does not apply to students, no.
And the only way to ensure that students are vaccinated is through the Immunization of School Pupils Act. Is that correct? I don't know if I guess this is for Superintendent Blackwell.
Through the chair to the chair, you are correct.
Okay, well, I'd actually like to suggest to the minister that this be added, the COVID be added to the list of designated diseases. And I do have a motion that I'll put forward here. So whereas COVID-19 vaccines have been approved by Health Canada to be safe and effective for students born 2009 or earlier, and whereas the purpose of the Immunization of School Pupils Act is to increase the protection of the health of children against the diseases that are designated diseases, and whereas the Immunization of School Pupil Act mandates that students be immunized for designated diseases, which include diphtheria, measles, mumps, poliomyelitis, rubella, and tetanus, unless a specific exemption is sought through the Act. Be it resolved that the chair write a letter to the Minister of Education and Minister of Health to ask that the Immunization of School Pupils Act be amended to include COVID-19 as a designated disease. And Trustee Shuttleworth looks like she'd like to second this motion. Is there any discussion on this at all? Looking to the speakers list. Trustee Collard.
Hi, yes, I support this motion, but I am curious, do you need to have any parameters in there regarding stating that, the vaccines must be approved for a certain age, or is that already something that's covered in the legislation regarding immunization of students? I'm not as familiar with that document as I might be about education documents, so I just want to make sure we don't have to be more specific or.
I don't think that it's in our purview to actually write in the eligibility or not. I think that's the job of the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education. So I think they can work out those details, and we are just saying, please add it to the list as the vaccine is seen to be safe and effective.
Okay, thank you.
And also it's just the fact that it then makes vaccination more of a default, but there is, again, the ability to seek an exemption just like regular vaccinations through the Act. So it's not like we'd be, you can't, not like we would be excluding children from school. That's not the purpose of this, but it is to really make vaccination the default and make our schools as safe as possible. So looking to the list, Trustee Rocha, go right ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, I think you just answered my question, and that was, if a child is not vaccinated for whatever reason, either by, doesn't matter, for whatever reason, I want to ensure that we're not going to prevent them from attending school. So I wanted to just confirm that with other vaccinations in the Act, kids can attend school without being vaccinated as long as they fill out the proper paperwork.
Yeah, there is an exemption process, and I don't know if staff want to speak to what we know about that exemption process, because I'm sure we go through it.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
So I'll jump in on this one. So through the chair to Trustee Rocha, we do have the Immunization School Pupils Act that we work to support public health with, in ensuring that our students are immunized according to the vaccinations that are already listed in that. Trustees may recall that a few years ago, families, and you may have received it for your own children, they would be receiving reminders of students that do not have the vaccinations required to attend school. Those reminders come with the process in terms of appropriate accommodations or exemptions for the actual vaccine that is required. The other piece with that is that we did, and we do as part of this, suspend students temporarily until they meet the requirements of either getting the vaccinations that they should be getting or until we have the exemption in place for students. And so that's something that we are working with, that we work with our public health unit. Right now, we are a couple of years behind in terms of some of our immunizations, just in terms of, the grade 7 immunizations that were usually provided through the school year. The last couple of years have had some gaps in that. So we have about 3 years worth of students to catch up with this year. And the actual suspension piece is not going to be applied to students this year. But we'll be supporting students to actually get caught up in all of the vaccinations. So long-winded answer, but we do have a process in which we follow in accordance with that act.
Okay, does that answer your question, Trustee Rocha?
Yes, it does. And I think based on this additional information, I will be supporting the motion.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking at the speakers list, and I do not see any other speakers at this time. So we shall take a vote. All those in favor? Again, this is about writing a letter to the Minister of Education and the Minister of Health. If everyone could just double check that they're on the list. I don't think I see Trustee Bao. And you're welcome to give a verbal vote if you like. Oh, there she is. Okay, great. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. So I will write a letter. Okay. I don't see any other questions, so I guess we'll move on to the ventilation update.
Thank you, Chair Gerbrands. At this time, I'm going to invite Executive Officer Ian Gaudette to provide us with an update on ventilation.
Thank you, Director Ennis. Good evening, Chair Gerbrands and trustees. As Superintendent Taha mentioned earlier, ventilation is just one of the many measures that we use to help protect our staff and students. And I'm pleased that when I joined the Halton District School Board 8 months ago, that we've got an excellent team, well educated and well experienced. And this team works within the guidelines set out by the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, known as ASHRAE. So these are experts that an expert community recognized worldwide. We follow their guidance. We work closely with them on their expert panel advising government agencies around how to handle ventilation during this pandemic. So to back up a little bit, I'll say, Halton has a long history of investments through capital, renewal, school condition improvement, as well as their own resources through proceeds of disposition and accumulated surplus to support such initiatives as Close the Gap, which have enhanced ventilation in many schools and added air conditioning. So in addition to this past year's $27 million that we've been granted by the Ministry for School Renewal and School Condition Improvement, we also were fortunate enough to gain $19.4 million of the COVID Resilient Infrastructure Stream funding, and that enabled 143 projects across our board. These projects included window upgrades to make windows that weren't operable. It included HVAC upgrades to enhance fresh air intake and add air conditioning. It included building automation controls to centrally control our system so that we could provide the 2-hour pre and post occupancy flushing of the building with fresh air. It also provided other measures to help support cohorting and distancing through many outdoor learning classroom environments, open concept modifications to build walls in schools that did not have walls between classrooms. It also supported some IT infrastructure upgrades to support wide area network upgrades, and also it supported some childcare improvements. So that, this year's capital investment has been almost $47 million, and much of that has gone towards ventilation upgrades in the order of $20 million, and we forecast about the same investment into ventilation next year as well. To back up to the beginning of the pandemic, our ventilation systems were adjusted at the outset. As I indicated, we've started with a 2-hour flushing of the building system where we have mechanical ventilation, so that we flush the building with as much fresh air as we can, and that continues on after the students have left the building. As well, we've done assessments of our buildings to look at the ideal or bare minimum that we are seeking. Ideally, we want to see at least 6 air changes per hour in our buildings, and that has been assessed. And where we found shortages, we developed measures to try and rectify that. Along with that, we also looked at operable windows. If we had classrooms without operable windows, that these became some of the sites that would be prioritized for deployment of the air purifiers that we then purchased through ministry funding as well. I'll say that at the outset of this also, our board was already changing filters every 2 months, but we upgraded our filters to MERV 13 as per the expert guidance, and we continue to change our air filters every 2 months. So based on all the foregoing, we identified needs for about 500 air purifiers system-wide for classrooms that didn't have operable windows, didn't have mechanical ventilation, and we delivered those out last year. As well, we prioritized some of our community pathways programs that were operating during the lockdown to help mitigate anxieties and support those students and staff working in those conditions. More recently, we've completed several information requests under pretty tight timelines to meet the ministry's objectives, and as a result of all that work on many members at the Halton District School Board, not only on my team in facilities, we did receive a truck with 7 truckloads of air purifiers. We received more than 1,000 new air purifiers to our receiving site just last Monday, the 23rd. And since then, we have deployed more than 95% of those to schools to support additional air purification within classrooms. So they have been deployed to schools and are ready for use. Along with that, then, we have updated our website and had updated it during the summer months, but more recently have been asked to use the ministry's template to further specify what our measures are So by September 7th, we'll have that up and running. We're going through some testing right now to make sure it's accessible to most users. But that'll highlight our 4 key strategic measures around ventilation. It'll also highlight our investment last year as well as this coming year. And then more importantly for the many concerned stakeholders, it'll enable a drop-down of school listing that you can select to find out if the school that your student, your child attends is mechanically ventilated or partially mechanically ventilated, and how many air purifiers have been delivered to that school. With all that, I want to say great thanks and gratitude to the collaboration amongst many different departments to get this feat done. Certainly communications, finance, our facilities team, and people on the ground making this happen has been wonderful. And due to the timing of all of this, we've had many staff that have worked on their vacation, and I thank them. So with that, I'll say all of the above will require additional measures to maintain. So we've got more than 1,500 additional units within our schools to ensure that we change out filters regularly and keep them updated. So with that, we've had several questions from members of the public and concerned parents asking about what other measures we might contemplate, such as ultraviolet UV light or carbon dioxide, CO2. And I'll say UV light is something that we're staying away from currently. We do believe that can be a bit of a risk as well in schools with curiosity of students. It's typically used in hospitals and food industries to help support disinfection, and is not something that our expert panel has recommended. Further, demand ventilation or measuring CO2 is something that some boards utilize. I'll say Halton does not utilize it widely, but that can I'll say assess the occupancy of a classroom or a space. As the bodies increase, the CO2 increases, and that can activate our mechanical systems to start to pump in fresh air or heat air. And I'll say, even with those systems, that would likely be disabled and overridden, trying to do our 2-hour flush and get as much fresh air into buildings as we can. I should say with that, things like energy recovery or recirculation systems, those have been minimized as well. So in fact, we're either heating or cooling more air that we bring in because it is fresh air from outside. It's not being recycled as much as it may have been in the past. So with all of that, we're still striving to meet our building codes. We work with our building inspectors and our fire inspectors. We work with ASHRAE. And as well, the ministry guidance documentation, we are following that. And so those that may suggest that we're only doing the bare minimum is in fact not truthful. We have gone beyond and above, and are certainly as concerned about our student and staff safety as many members of our communities are. So with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Executive Officer Gaudette. We have a couple of people on the speakers list right now. Trustee Collard, go right ahead.
Thank you. Through you to Superintendent Gaudette. Thank you so much for the work you've done, not just this past summer, but actually since you were hired. It's been one COVID thing after another, and I know that it's much appreciated by staff and students alike. My question comes from one particular school community, and that is Pineland. You and I have had an opportunity to converse about Pineland a few times. When the Close the Gap list was first produced about 10 years ago, Pineland was on the top of the list to receive air conditioning on their second floor because it gets extremely hot, sometimes as hot as 40 degrees Celsius on that floor due to poor ventilation, lack of shade, and no cross breezes. I've had members of the community extremely nervous about sending their children to school, especially those students who will be occupying the second floor, which is usually the intermediate grades, sometimes the junior grades as well. And they're concerned about their students being in these very, very hot spaces, wearing masks to keep safe from COVID, and they're worried that their students won't be getting enough oxygen and that they will be overheating. And I'm wondering if you can outline some of the measures that you're taking. I know we were supposed to get air conditioning installed this past summer, but that the prices were prohibitively high. And given how much money you spent this past summer on ventilation, I understand that completely. But this particular school community's been waiting for a very long time. So I would just like to have some sense of your direction on this.
Thank you for the question through Chair Gerbents to trustees. Pineland is now at the top of my list. I will say, yes, we did tender it, and unfortunately we were experiencing, probably 15% premiums on some of our jobs, but this one came in approximately 80% higher. And with that, we made the difficult decision to defer it. We didn't feel that we were getting good value for money. As such, we do anticipate retendering it this fall with the notion that we'll get at it as quick as possible. This project was quite substantial, I'll say. It was not only the second floor, it was also the first floor, as I understand it, in our scope of work. 30 unit ventilators were to be installed. Unfortunately, we did not pre-order for this school. So certainly the supply chain and the cost increases were impacts to this. But certainly it is a priority for me to complete. I certainly don't want to have schools out there with needs for a decade. So I recognize that. In the interim, it will be challenging when there is hot weather. Hopefully we get comfortable weather in the shoulder seasons in September and in June. But we do have measures in place to try and provide schools to assess how they can manage that. Fortunately, we've been granted additional funds to create outdoor learning spaces. Hopefully they can be utilized, but I do recognize the challenge, and especially given the PPE that our students are wearing, it will be challenging, and my apologies that we couldn't deliver that successfully this summer.
Thank you for your response.
Thank you, and Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much. I'm really, really pleased to hear a lot of this. I've been frantically writing down. There's a lot of detail in there to try and write down, and hopefully I got it all. One thing that caught me with the operational windows, and I think that's really important, and I love that you've done that. But my mind always goes when we do something that can sometimes have an unintended effect. And I was wondering if having operational windows has in any way affected our insurance costs or our security in our schools.
Thank you for the question through Chair Gerbents to trustees. I'm not aware that it has impacted our school costs or insurance costs. I'll say based on my earlier experience with the pandemic, in fact, because of the school closures, it did seem like vandalism and such actually reduced, not as many people out and about. Certainly that is a concern, though, just around environmental conditions, not even vandalism or otherwise. If we do leave these windows open, that can be problematic as we get into inclement weather. So it is, at the direction or discretion of the teachers to open the windows when it's comfortable to do so, to try and provide additional fresh air. And so with that, hopefully they're closing them when classes are complete as well. And I should add, based on your comments that you're furiously writing, a lot of this is on our website, and I hope that stakeholders do find that useful. We did spend some time trying to inform the communities what we are doing, because we anticipated this to be an issue upon school return, long before we got additional funding to deliver our air purifiers.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, thank you, I don't.
Okay, Vice Chair Al Harrison, go right ahead.
Great. Thanks very much. Through you, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you. I think it's great that the information will be going up on the website and that people can find out a bit more granular information about what's happening in particular locations. And it might be worthwhile considering adding that the fact that that information is available to an upcoming communication, maybe in combination with something else that's going out about all of the other things that are going on. So that's just a comment. And my question is, could you briefly walk through the process of how it's determined where these air purifiers are placed? So if staff have the layout of the school, I understand that additional systems are going, or units are going into like libraries and gyms, for example. What would some other priority areas be? Do we have enough? And is there a process by which, you know, if people get into the school year and see that there's a need in an additional room, can they make those requests? And can they be fulfilled?
Certainly, thanks for the question through Chair Gerbrands to trustees. You know, the initial assessment was based, I'll say, based on risk, and we've seen that evolve over time. So even our initial assessment and our delivery of almost 500, we felt adequately addressed system needs where we felt that we lacked ventilation and didn't have operable windows. With the additional ministry announcement and investment into air purifiers, they prioritized our full-day kindergarten or junior SK and JK classrooms. And part of the rationale was that they wouldn't be masked. We've since adjusted to that. And I'll say a lot of that was addressed through our first round and through our first investment. Many of our FDK classrooms were already contemplated in the initial 500 deployment. So with that, that has afforded us a little bit of freedom. So in addition to the classroom deployment, we have been sending an additional 3 units to a school. We felt that some schools have perhaps a busy entryway and a larger space. So if there's outlets there, we could plug them in there to provide some comfort and some additional air purification to support, you know, inadvertent gathering, I'll say, as people perhaps queue into the building, as well. Certainly for larger spaces, that was part of the intent, was to support gymnasiums or libraries, and then I'll say also lunchrooms where people are eating and removing their masks. And with that deployment, we hope that administrators have that flexibility to deploy, you know, an additional 1 or 2 to spaces that, you know, while they may be designed for a certain air change, we all know that sometimes circumstances are such that we don't get the optimal airflow as intended, and so certainly that can help to address some of those problematic areas. And then lastly, I'll say that we did receive additional funding to purchase additional units. So as staff and students get back into schools, if we've missed the mark in any classroom, certainly administrators can make that request, and I think we can make that happen.
Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Reynolds, go right ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to touch off on the comment with respect to my colleague has raised about, do we need more air purifier units in spaces? And I'm looking at, my question is based upon those schools that are not mechanically vented, that absolutely need the air purifiers. What data are you collecting, or how are you measuring the air quality of those spaces that would give you evidence that we're being effective in our placement and selection of where they're going?
Thanks for the question. Through the chair, I think I'll start by just saying even schools that are not mechanically ventilated often have exhaust fans throughout the building, so that, you know, there is some pull and some draw and some fresh air being brought into facilities, but certainly those with radiator heats and no air supply in the classrooms, those would have been the targets in terms of providing the additional air purifiers, and then certainly those classrooms that didn't have operable windows are also a problem. In terms of the term air quality opens up a potential big can of worms. There's many metrics you can use for air quality: CO, CO2, radon, mold. There's many. So I will say we don't have a bunch of CO2 monitors in our schools because that would be overwhelming. Certainly, if we have air quality concerns, we have a process that we put in place to go in and assess. And if we identify problems, then we work to remediate them. So it's I'll say more targeted and specific, so that we can allocate the resources to properly address it, as opposed to trying to monitor the whole system and not having the ability to do so very well.
Do you have a follow-up? I will assume that answer is no. There are no other speakers on the speakers list. So thank you very much, Executive Officer Godet and Director Ennis. Your next item.
Thank you so much, Chair Gerbrands. Through you, I'd like to invite our Superintendent of Business Services and our Treasurer, Roxana Nagoy, to speak to trip refund.
Thank you, Director Ennis. And for you, Chair Gerbrands, to all trustees, we have a bit of an update on the trip refunds. We've been in contact with Explorica, and we understand that our families, our insured families, have been refunded through the month of July on their trips for the full amount less the cost of the premium. We are still gathering some information in terms of those that are without insurance, and we'll provide the trustees with more update at the upcoming meeting. But we are happy to say that for the most part, probably all but about 14 families should have received their trip costs in terms of refunds, whether it was through Explorica or one of their insurers, depending on what the settlement had determined. So that's a bit of good news for our families, and we will provide a bit of an update to our families in the weeks to come once we get all the clarification from the trip provider. Thank you.
And no speakers on the speakers list, so go right ahead, Director Ennis.
Thank you, Chair Gerbrands. That ends the Director's report for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are now up to communications from the Chair. So I want to say, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the trustees, that we'd like to commend the staff for all the work that they have put in this summer. A lot of the times there wasn't a lot of clear direction from the ministry, and yet they move forward to try and fill in the gaps to make sure that the school year that we're coming into is as safe an environment as possible for all of our students and staff. There have been lots of last-minute changes and to the guidelines, and some of them have, as you heard, not even been formalized yet, and classes start next Tuesday. Children and families are looking at next week with excitement, as well as some trepidation, and that's understandable. But I do want to commend Halton residents at our very high rates of vaccination. I was looking at the site, the halton.ca site today, and we are sitting at 84% that have for one dose and 79% fully vaccinated among all eligible residents. And that is fantastic. We are actually one of the top vaccinated regions in the province. And that's probably also in the country. So, yeah, great job. Keep going out there. You know, if you've had one vax and you need that second one, don't hesitate to get that second one when you're ready. And if you haven't done it yet, please talk to your doctor if you have some questions, because the more people that are vaccinated in our system, the more we protect those that cannot be vaccinated or that have compromised or poor immune systems. So it takes a society to, you have to be it takes a village to to raise our kids, but it also to be part of society, you have to do your part too. So last year we were very good at keeping COVID cases very low and very few outbreaks. And I entreat everybody to stay vigilant at keeping COVID out of our schools by keeping students home if they are symptomatic and getting them tested when it is appropriate and necessary. And let's continue. Let's just continue keeping COVID out of our schools. And as we head into the new year, I hope that the excitement takes over from that feeling of trepidation. And I hope that students love school. I know students did love school last year too. I know we have a lot more students back in schools and looking forward to seeing their friends in person and seeing their teachers in person, and teachers and EAs and ECs and all the staff, seeing the buzz in the schools again. And I just want to thank all the staff for their flexibility, their professionalism, and their kindness and caring through the last year and going forward. So other than that, communications from the chair, we do have a few letters that are listed in our agenda package. We did send a correspondence to the Prime Minister and Premier around truth and reconciliation, and we have received a response both from the Prime Minister's office as well as the office of Premier Doug Ford. I did have one question, though, that perhaps staff can answer. Just a clarification that September 30th is now a statutory holiday and there will be no school. I keep getting that question, and I'm not sure of I want to make sure I'm giving the right answer.
Through the chair, Chair Gerbens, I do not believe that that is a no school day. It is like a Remembrance Day, and so schools will be open, and that is my understanding at this time.
Yeah, because that was my understanding, and then other people kept going back and forth. So yeah, there's a lot of wishful thinking out there, I think. But I actually personally think it's great if students are in school that day, because certainly they can focus on truth and reconciliation rather than going to the beach or something. So yeah, that's good. Thank you very much for clarifying. And I don't have anything more from communications from the chair. Committee reports. I'm assuming we have none, but I will look to the speakers list for a minute here. Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Trustee Gray, go right ahead.
Thank you very much. May I give an OPSPA report at this time?
Of course you can.
Okay, thank you very much. On August the 10th, OPSPA wrote to all school board chairs about the online survey that they're intending to roll out. And it's a survey designed to continue to inform OPSPA's advocacy to the provincial government through the 21-22 school year and beyond. The survey is asking community members throughout Ontario to share some of their thoughts about learning online during the COVID-19 pandemic and the post-pandemic school and learning environment. I will send information out to trustees. This is something that we will need to address possibly at the next Committee of the Whole meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And seeing no other speakers for committee report, we are on to trustee questions and comments. Trustee Shuttleworth, go right ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to Executive Officer Gaudette and probably also Director Ennis. I'm just wondering, so I know that in September, Nelson was expected to have the construction completed. However, as I drive past still now, I still see construction going on. So I'm just wondering what the status is of the construction at Nelson and how it will impact the students on their return to school.
Thank you. Through Chair Gerbents, I'm going to ask Executive Officer Ian Gaudette to speak to that.
Thank you, Director Ennis. And through the chair to trustees, the project at Nelson is, I think it's its fourth or fifth phase and has been a long project. And my understanding is that we are wrapping up deficiencies in many of the spaces that the students will occupy. Certainly the one exception to that is the elevator construction that is actively ongoing. So I believe the shaft has been poured and we're working on the brick veneer. So that is fenced off and should not impact student activities in terms of their learning or their attendance at classrooms. But hopefully once it is complete this fall, that should enhance the accessibility to the floors at Nelson.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes. So you say it doesn't impact learning. So I do know that the library is on the second floor. So I'm just wondering, as far as accessibility to the library for students who may have mobility issues or staff that may have mobility issues, is there an alternative route other than the elevator that's being constructed that will allow the students and or staff to get to the second floor?
Thanks for that question, and I'll be honest, I will have to defer to others. I had been in the school once and toured the construction. I don't recall seeing if there was an existing elevator, and perhaps others that are more familiar with the facility might be able to enlighten me. I've only been in the school once.
Through the chair, Chair Gerbents, so I'd like to ask Superintendent Etov if he would give us any further insight into the school.
Thanks very much. I apologize. I just had some technical issues here. Would you mind please repeating the question?
Sure. So I'm just checking. Executive Officer Gaudette was saying that the elevator construction at Nelson is delayed. So I'm just wondering, I know that the library is on the second floor, and I'm just wondering, for students and or staff who have mobility issues, is there an alternative accessible route for them to get up to the second floor?
Yes, and certainly I can get Superintendent Blackwell to jump in here as well, but there is an existing elevator lift within the building, which is operational and has been used in the past for accessibility to the second floor. I believe it is still operational. So I'm not sure whether Superintendent Blackwell wants to add anything further to that, but the plan was to continue with that and with this additional elevator to provide yet more upgraded facilities and better access to that second floor. But there is access, to my knowledge.
Okay. Okay, and just to clarify for anybody watching, Executive Officer Gadet started with us during COVID. And so that's why he's only been at the school once. If he was a long-standing staff member, that might have been a big issue. Okay, next on the list is Trustee Daniele.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, probably to Director Ennis. We all know that a federal election has been called on September 20th, and in the past, schools have been designated spots for polling stations. Given the short term of the election and how quickly it's happening, along with COVID, will our schools be used as polling stations? A. B, if they are, will we be able to get a list of which one of our schools are being used as polling stations? And C, if they are, what measures will be in place to protect our students, both simply from strangers in the building, but now as well with pandemic measures? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Trustee Daniele. And through Chair Gerbens, I'd like to ask Executive Officer Ian Godet to speak to this because he's on a working group that has worked out some of the very questions that you're asking.
Sorry, Ian, I'm not picking on you tonight. I really am not.
Thank you for the question, and yeah, very topical. Through the chair to trustees, we have been working with a group, meets with our coterminous boards and other stakeholders, and our position has been that we recommend the use of our secondary schools as the primary solution for the federal election, partly because of the issues that you just mentioned, and as well to, I'll say, minimize the number of sites. We recognize that in terms of accessibility and equity around the community, that many polling stations will be required for access. And so with that, I wouldn't say there's a hard line in the sand. If we have some difficult communities where there aren't many options, certainly we can entertain those individual needs. But our focus has been on secondary schools as the primary offering, and as well there's other community resources available to them with community centers and churches and such. So we think we can meet the needs of the community through that, and I believe our coterminous board has taken the same tact.
Thank you. And will we be able to find out which of our schools are and what safety precautions will be in place?
Yeah, certainly. I don't have a list of schools yet, but as we look to finalize that, we can share that with trustees and others. I'm not sure when that will be finalized, and certainly, I think each school will need to be assessed independently as we look at travel path and where people will park and access the building. But yeah, certainly we will want to minimize the interactions with staff and student in the building.
Thank you very much. I know those voter registration cards are going out very, very soon, if they're not already out, listing where people vote. That's why I was curious. Thank you for the information.
And through Chair Gerbens, if I may just add, Trustee Daniele, that some of the guidelines that we were offered from Dr. Karen Moore was that we should have direct path to a location or the polling station within the building, and that there must be separate entrance and exits. And we must be able to keep students, to your very point, and including licensed childcare, separate from the public. And I know that when we had the conversation in the senior team, there were concerns raised around mixing of the public with our students and our licensed care centers. And so we wanted to make sure that we put health and safety first. And so that's why Executive Officer Godet and his team are making the recommendations that they are.
Thank you, Director Ennis.
Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. Through the chair to Director, could you speak to or confirm regarding our September 2021 plan for students that our board is implementing another layer of protection for students through mandating outdoor cohorting? And I guess this question comes from some families who have read the Ministry of Education document that was released and indicated that this document indicated that outdoor cohorting wasn't essential. So I'm hoping that you could perhaps address this and perhaps explain if we are doing it and why we are doing it.
Through Chair Grabentz to Trustee Reynolds, thank you for the question. I'm going to ask Superintendent Blackwell to speak to this, as she's been intimate with our operational guidelines and providing information and direction for schools.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Through the chair to Trustee Reynolds. We did receive this question as well last week for our webinar with Dr. Magani. So I would encourage people, if they haven't had a chance to look at that webinar, there's lots of great information. So the guidance that we were given from the province, much of the guidance in that document talks about consultation with public health. And as you're very much aware, we work in partnership with public health. We meet weekly. We have conversations of what things look like. Part of the guidance that we received from public health around increased measures for safety for our students was that we would include masking for kindergarten, and that was a decision that came from public health and a recommendation that we've adopted. With that came another additional request to maintain cohorting in our elementary schools. And much of that is around the contact tracing pieces to start the year with some more strict measures. It's a partnership in which we take guidance because of their expertise in the medical health field, obviously. And it's one in which we, as a board, it would not be prudent for us to say, we'll take this recommendation that you want us to implement and ignore another one. So that's a measure that was provided to us to start the year. We'll see how things go, and if we're able to lift restrictions around the cohorting outside, that is something that we'll be happy to do.
Follow up, please.
Sure.
Thank you. So I appreciate the information, and I think parents who are tuning in will appreciate hearing this. I think this comes from a place where parents are really worried about their children's mental wellness, and certainly are looking for, I want to say, they're looking for opportunities for their kids to sort of mix outside in a safe environment, and to have some semblance of normalcy. So I'm just wondering what you can say to the parents, or what can we tell parents whose kids are really struggling with this limited cohort that they're staying with during the day?
Yeah, it's a really good question through the chair back to Trustee Reynolds. One of the meetings, we had a meeting this morning with public health, and we talked a lot about, the balance in the measures to support students in their health and safety, while ensuring or while attempting to meet the needs of their mental health and well-being. And, I know that there are other areas where there's restrictions on certain activities. I think we talked about co-curricular activities this year. And that is a decision, we've been encouraged to continue safely with those activities, very much so for that reason. So there are other opportunities that schools will be providing to try and engage students and create opportunities. We've seen something in some of the documentation around assemblies. No, we are not doing whole school assemblies, but there are ways in which two cohorts can assemble in a large space and be separated but still engaged. So, they might be sharing the library space, and there will be some challenges for sure in terms of navigating the cohorts, but our staff are very much aware. We know also that students are happy just to come back and see each other, period, right? That they're coming back. So we hope that, as vaccination rates increase and we maintain good practices, we keep kids home when they're sick, and staff adhere to all those protocols, that we'll be in a very different place very shortly, so that some of these restrictions can be lifted.
Through the chair, if I may just add, to Trustee Reynolds as well. When students are returning to the building next week, in terms of their mental health and well-being, our staff have provided a significant number of resources for schools to use to engage students in supporting their mental health and well-being. And we've spoken about creating the environment in which students are going to feel like someone cares about them, that they truly belong, and that they're part of an inclusive environment. And these are some of the conditions that we are expecting schools to create that will allow students to feel that their mental health and well-being will be positively enhanced by being in this environment, as Superintendent Blackwell stated.
Do you have any follow-up further? You're okay? Okay. Trustee Gray, go right ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. I've had some inquiries from the community, and it's some of the members of the Halton Hills Community Council, Schools Community Council, or Super Council, as many of you would know your groups to be, about the elections for school council. Ontario Regulation 612/00 says elections for school councils must be held annually within the first 30 calendar days. And I guess one of the questions that was asked was, is this going to be held to? I believe last year we relaxed a little bit on that. Was there any comment that the board could make this evening about that time frame? Thank you.
Through Chair Gerbentz, I'm going to ask Associate Director Bolg if he would speak to this.
Thanks, Director Ennis, and through the chair to Trustee Gray. This year, our intentions with our school councils will be to continue to run virtual school council meetings. Actually, there were some real benefits that we learned last year around running virtual meetings in terms of getting lots of parents and community out to meetings. They're just a little bit more accessible that way. It would be our intent, I think, to try to get back to a bit of a more normal routine, and I don't see that we will have a big challenge in terms of meeting those timelines that have been outlined each year.
And follow up, please. Could you comment on the board's expectations around fundraising in schools?
Absolutely. Another great question again with our philosophy of trying to sort of get back into the swing of things, and knowing that some of those fundraising pieces are really important to kids and families in terms of other opportunities for them at school. Fundraising is back on this year. We really were cautious last year to limit that, as you know, and again, we're easing optimistically into a more normal year, and so we've removed those restrictions, and so schools will be starting to think about opportunities for fundraising, those kinds of things, and school councils obviously will be part of that work as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, there are no more trustee questions and comments, so I just have one, and it's going to probably the best person to answer this would be Superintendent Trufin, actually. And that is that our HTSB phone app, I love it. It's fantastic. And the one thing that I'm finding that would be a great addition is if we had a link to the screening that we need to do every time we enter a building. And I was wondering if you're probably way ahead of me. I was just wondering if there's plans for that.
Well, you complimented the phone app, so I think it's very only appropriate that I let the superintendent, who is really responsible for the phone app, so I'm going to let Superintendent Podjabarek answer that question.
Hi, through the chair, to the chair. Yeah, we're actually looking at that. It's a great idea. We think it'll make the screening tool certainly more available and quick access for parents. So it is something we're looking at right now as a team, and we hope to have an answer around its feasibility very soon.
Excellent. Thank you. And there are no more questions or comments from trustees. So now we're up to public questions. So to ask a question, use the button on the live stream page on the hdsb.ca website. Questions posed during our meetings of the Board of Trustees or Committee of the Whole may be answered during that meeting, particularly those related to agenda items or at the following meeting at the discretion of the chair. For efficiency, multiple questions received that are similar in nature may be grouped together at the discretion of the chair or vice chair. Questions will not be attributed. When necessary, a notation will be made that multiple people asked the same question. Any questions that contain language that is hateful or discriminatory will not be considered. And just a reminder that there are several ways to be heard by the Board of Trustees about your questions or concerns regarding governance and policies, because that's really the questions that should be coming here, are very broad sort of questions, not specifically about a specific school or a specific classroom or things like that. We encourage you, if you have those sorts of questions, to please interface with a school principal or the teacher if it's all the way down to that level. So, Vice Chair Al Harrison, have we had any questions submitted this evening?
Thank you. Through Madam Chair, yes, we did have one. It was related to the rapid testing of employees, and Superintendent Taha did answer that question under the item in the director's report.
Excellent. Okay. So I understand we need to go back into private session. So I need a motion to rise and reconvene. Look on the thing. Look on what thing? I don't know. Trustee Gray, would you like to? Yes, thank you.
Yes, I would.
And Trustee Shuttleworth, you're in my eye there. Would you like to second? Sure. Okay, excellent. Yes. Is there any discussion on rising and reconvening at all? Seeing none. So all those in favor? My voting app has gone a little crazy here. That definitely carries. Let me see. I have 12, so I'm just missing one. One in there. Well, I assume it's actually unanimous. If anybody hasn't seen them.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So we are now in private session. So Kevin, are we